Welcome back everyone. Hi if you're new, my name is Tori and today I'm going to take you guys through all the books that I read in the month of July, but I also have one book that I finished kind of near the, ooh, that book is sliding. I do have one book that I finished near the tail end of June, kind of leading into July, so that is in the stack as well. And overall, it wasn't the best reading month that I've had. Actually, when I think about the year as a whole, it was probably one of the weaker reading months that I've had so far. Most of the books that I read this month, with the exception of one which I loved and which you guys probably already know what that book is, but most of the books were just kind of like good, but they weren't great. They didn't blow me away, and there was one in here that I actually really did not like. So yeah, it's kind of a weird little stack here, but I do have several books to share with you, so let's get into it. So let's start with the book that I finished near the end of June, kind of leading into July, and that was Lost Gods by Micah Yongo. This is an adult fantasy novel and it's the first in a duology. I'm not sure if the series is going to continue, but I know that there are 2 books currently out right now. And in this we have a main character, Nathan, who is part of this brotherhood of assassins. And then one day something happens when one of Nathan's brothers is brutally murdered and Nathan himself is framed for the crime. And he knows who did it, but he's just kind of like, whoa, what is going on? What is happening? And so really the book is this journey of Nathan trying to find out what is going on, why in the heck would he be framed, but in the process of that he's learning a lot of deep secrets about this brotherhood that he's been a part of, and just a lot of things that Nathan knows about this brotherhood and that he's known for years or that he thought he knew. It's just starting to unravel. Overall, I did enjoy this. I thought it was a solid fantasy novel. I actually really enjoyed Micah Yongo's writing style. I thought in the beginning it wasn't something that I would mesh with too well, but just as the book progressed, I really loved the careful and really layered world building that Micah Yongo does throughout the book. I really loved Nathan as a character, so that was really great to see. But Micah just has a really kind of calm writing style, and that it just flows really well when he's doing world building and just this long journey that Nathan is going on. It's expressed really well, so I really enjoyed that aspect of it, and I think overall it was just a solid fantasy read. I actually will be continuing on with this. I am curious to know what's going to happen in the second book, and yeah, I'm happy I read this. I think this is really underrated. I don't see very many Goodreads reviews or ratings about this book, so if you are curious to pick this up, I think it's a great underrated read. The next book that I read was The Queue, and this is by Basma, Abdel, Aziz, and this is a work of Arab literature, which was really interesting to read. I can't really recall in recent memory when I've read a work of Arab literature before, so this was fascinating. This is an adult dystopian novel, and in this we have this world where this uprising has happened prior to the events of the book, and there's this like lone authority known as the Gate, and citizens line up in front of this gate. The queue just kind of snakes around the block and everything, and people are lined up to get permission from the gate to just do basic things or to receive prescriptions for their medical needs. But one of our main characters in this is Yaya. I believe that's how you pronounce his name, and he's standing in the queue for his own reasons, and as the book progresses you obviously find out what that is. But as the book rolls on, we're also seeing the story unfold through the perspective of a doctor who has Yeha's file in front of him, and so it's kind of flipping back and forth between that, and you find out that Yeha was somehow involved in this previous uprising that happened, and you learn the reasons that he's standing in this long queue. But kind of on the sinister side of things, the gate doesn't want it to get out the things that happened to Yeha and just the overall type of power and authority that the gate actually has. So I mean, there's a lot going on in here, and this is just such a terrifying look at just one lone entity having like full control and full power. It's a really terrifying thing to read, but I do recommend this. This was really interesting, and yeah, it was a great read. The next book that I read was a buddy read, and I read this with Olive from A Book Olive, which I will leave a link to her channel in the description box below. She's amazing. She reads a lot of nonfiction, adult literary fiction, so definitely go check her out. And we buddy read The Word Exchange together, and oh, I didn't like this book. I did not like this book. Oh my goodness. Now, I had a great time buddy reading it with Olive and hearing her thoughts as we moved throughout the book. She had some really interesting takes on it, which was great to hear. But overall, this book, we did not get along very well. So this book takes place in a world where books and libraries and just the like written word, print word is just not a thing anymore. And instead people depend on this device called a meme. It supplies them with the words that they need. It gives them, it's like everything in one. Everything that you could possibly need is on this meme. But we do have a handful of people who are hard at work on this new edition of the dictionary. And so one of our main characters, Anna, her father is the chief editor of the dictionary, and the book starts when Anna's father disappears. And I mean, from there, it becomes a mystery of like what happened to him, but also there's this word flu going around that's making people forget words and just forget meanings of words, and so people are even more reliant on their memes. This book does have a lot going for it premise wise, but just I think the way it was executed just really did not work for me. Ironically, I thought it was very wordy. There's just her prose, it just goes on and on. It's just so dry and it sounds kind of pretentious in some places, and I just didn't like it, didn't enjoy it. Funny enough, I actually enjoyed the second half of the book a lot more. I know Olive enjoyed the first half a lot more than the second half, but the second half we get into a lot of like what the word flu actually is and what it's doing and how it's spreading. And so that was really interesting to read about. And overall, this book didn't work for me at all. The next book that I read is one that I'm not going to spend too much time on because I do have a full review of this on my channel. And notice how my face just got a lot brighter and I'm smiling a lot more because this book was so good. And that, of course, is The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. This is amazing. This is N.K. Jemisin's latest release. It just came out a few months ago. And this is an urban fantasy novel set in New York City. And in this book, we have this premise where these beings can become the literal embodiment of a particular city, and cities can die and they can be reborn. And so the characters that we're following in this book, they are the embodiment of New York City's 5 different boroughs. And they, throughout, over the course of the story, they're coming together, trying to band together and figure out what the heck is going on, because this looming threat is rising in the city and threatening to destroy everything. So this was great. It was so unique. It's just always fun to read N.K. Jemisin's work, and I love it. I loved it. Go read it. I will leave a link to my full review in the description box below for you to check out, because I really enjoyed this. Not only did I enjoy the writing, of course, which always with N.K. Jemisin, I enjoyed the writing, but I just enjoyed the messaging behind this. It just has so many really relevant social and just kind of modern day messages in it that I think were just handled and delivered so well and so boldly. The next book that I read was A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, and this is by Holly Jackson. I almost said Holly Black. This is by Holly Jackson, and it's labeled as a young adult thriller, but I mentioned this in a previous video. I would describe it more as like a young adult mystery because it just feels more like a mystery to me. In this book, we're following a main character named Pippa, or Pip, who is in her final year of high school. And as a final project, Pip chooses to reopen this investigation that happened 5 years ago in her town, where this girl was murdered by her boyfriend. And just something isn't sitting right with Pip. She just doesn't trust all the information that's out there. So she takes it upon herself to really just dive headfirst into this closed case and just look at the facts, look at the people involved, and see if she can really prove what happened that night 5 years ago. I did enjoy this overall. I thought this was a lot stronger in the first half than it was in the second half, but I did think it was really clever, just the way all the pieces were coming together. It really felt like a mystery, and you're so close to Pip's perspective for the entirety of the book. So it's like the people she doesn't trust, you don't trust. The people she raises her eyebrows at, you kind of like, oh, I don't know how to feel about you. So you really feel like you're in the thick of it with her, which I thought was so great from a reader's perspective. There did come a point near like the midway point where I was kind of like, okay, I'm ready to kind of wrap this book up now. I'm just ready to find out who did it, what happened. But overall, this was a pretty enjoyable read. I think if you're a fan of true crime podcasts, specifically Serial, then you'll recognize a lot of the terms and a lot of the things that are going on in this book. And just the premise of this book does sound heavily inspired by the real case that Serial covered in its first season. So I am happy I read this. This book, I found out, is the first in a series, and that is just so interesting to me. I don't think I'm going to continue on with the rest of the series. I actually think I might end up giving this book away, just because like it was good. It was a solid read. I enjoyed it. I thought it was clever, but I don't ever see myself going back to this book, and I don't think I'm going to continue on with the series. So I think I'm just going to pass it on to someone else who, can read this and might enjoy it. And I did mention this in my previous video as well, talking about this book, where if you're interested in reading it, I highly recommend you read it in its original form, which is the UK edition. So this little white and red cover. Although if you pick it up in the American edition, you're not going to know the differences because you're reading it for what it is. And then finally, the last book that I read in July was Shades of Grey, and this is by Jasper Fforde, and I buddy read this with Shannon from That's So Poe, and I will leave a link to Shannon's channel in the description box below for you to check out. And this, like the other 2 books I read, is an adult dystopian novel. I told you guys I read a lot of dystopian this month, which I don't think it's ever happened like that before. This is probably one of the most unique dystopian novels I think I've ever read. It reminds me a lot of like Fahrenheit 451, just in terms of little things that happen in its plot, and Shannon had some really great ideas about other dystopian novels that this book reminded her of too. So we had a really great time reading this and a really great discussion about it, especially towards the end, which was cool. So this book takes place in a society that abides by a colortocracy. So your standing depends on the particular color that you can perceive. So our main character Eddie, he is a red, and so he is at the bottom of society along with the grays. But we also have people who can perceive colors like blue and purple and green, and so they're higher than like people like reds and grays. So in this novel we have our main character Eddie, and he is a red, and so Eddie ends up moving to this really small town. And first of all, this book is just so it's so silly. At the beginning of every chapter there's a rule that this society has to follow, and the rules are just, they're so goofy and just make no sense at all, but it makes the book feel unique and funny, and it does have a really huge humorous aspect to it, which I actually was not expecting going into this. I did laugh out loud several times in this. So our main character Eddie, he moves to this small town, and it's there that he meets this other main character named Jane. And Jane, she's a gray, and she begins kind of showing Eddie just a different side of this society, and together they embark on this, it sounds like such an adventure story, they embark on this journey, if you will, and just start really uncovering some things about their society that, you know, Eddie didn't know before. Overall, I did like this book. I really loved Jane as a character. I thought she was great. She was just so snarky, and her dialogue with Eddie was just always just so great. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. But yeah, it wasn't great for me, but it wasn't terrible either. It was just a very kind of like middle of the road read, I guess. But I highly recommend that you check out Shannon's thoughts about this book whenever she uploads a video about it. She had some really great thoughts towards the end of it, and just some really insightful and really thought-provoking things that she had to say about it. I will say though, the book ended pretty abruptly, and Shannon actually brought this to my attention. It was intended for there to be a second book, and it definitely reads like there should have been a second book, and we just haven't gotten one yet. So do with that information what you will. Maybe that might impact how you go into this book, or if you choose to pick it up at all. But yeah, so that is it for me, you guys. Those are all the books that I read in the month of July. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know down in the comments how your reading month went and how your reading month is going right now in August, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.